This is a KinnPorsche Perfect Marriage Revenge crossover podfic of The Pain Never Really Goes Away by Solitary Bird, read for you by Solitary Bird. Summary. Pete had a shitty childhood with adults who didn't or couldn't protect him, and now he's left with a lot of anxiety around food. But Vegas is there to feed him. The pain never really goes away. He's just moulded himself around it. Pete's past is a raging fire whose smouldering ashes still burn him, and until very recently his everyday life has been as cold and as barren as an ice wasteland. Sandwiched between both sensations, he had been struggling to survive all on his own for years, until Pete met Vegas, the first person that he felt like he could trust, possibly ever. Even after years of being together, Pete relied on Vegas to make him safe food and to give him safe medication, both of which Pete's terrified of dealing with alone. His Vegas was a man who had freed Pete from pre-packaged foods and throwing out any drink that had been left out of his direct line of sight. His fear of what he consumes being adulterated and or contaminated is still overwhelming. Pete was more than willing to put the responsibility to ensure that he never even has to think about the possibility of that again into Vegas's hands, a duty that Vegas has taken on more than willingly once he notices how helpful he finds it. He'd spent more than enough days at his father's house via court-ordered visitation the man had fought his mother for, endlessly sleeping. He barely had memories of that house or that man, beyond the rare times he was awake and forced to deal with his father's drunken abuse. Children may sleep deeply, but Pete's unhealthy amount of sleep hadn't been natural. His father may have exhausted his birth mother financially and mentally by dragging her through the family law courts to get every weekend. But he never actually loved Pete, and he certainly didn't want to spend time with him, so he'd chosen to drug his child instead. By the time he was 12, Pete had probably ingested every single over-the-counter medication that had drowsiness as a side effect. That way he'd quietly sleep in a corner somewhere, and his father would go about his life as if Pete didn't exist. When he was 12, his pa had remarried a woman that had somehow despised Pete even more than his father. His stepmother had been slowly poisoning Pete to get rid of her unwanted, unloved stepson. His father wouldn't fully give up his parental rights, solely on the basis that it tormented his mother, and his stepmother resented Pete all the more for it. Pete was proof that his pa had once loved another woman, as much as that man was capable of loving anyone anyway. After escaping home and ending up involved in one of the largest mafia families in Bangkok, Pete had been doing all right managing the myriad of coping methods he'd had to come up with in order to not completely freak out. He'd snap up the pre-packaged snacks down in the staff canteen, storing them under the mattress of his bed or hidden in the pockets of his clothes, hanging in the small wardrobe in his dorm room. When it felt like people were watching him too closely to do that, Pete would pick one of the important bodyguards like P. Chan or Big and copy what they had chosen from the buffet, forcing himself to swallow past the rabbit-fast fluttering of his heart. No one would adulterate food that such important members of the bodyguards/security team might eat. What if the Minor family attacked and they needed them? Everyone would die. Eating his meals like that soon became the thing that Pete feared the most in his day-to-day life, until he met Vegas. Being with Vegas meant bespoke, handmade foods that Pete could watch being made from fresh vegetables. His personal chef busied himself with micronutrients that Pete had never heard of, and ran his kitchen with a level of hygiene that meant you could probably perform surgery on his surfaces. Pete had recently started to eat without thinking about it, when P. Tankun had asked him over to watch a K-drama for old time's sake, and it had undone all that work over the course of a few hours. The story of Han Yi-ju's family life is entirely too familiar, aside from the dying and returning for revenge against those who had wronged him. Pete can't eat the popcorn Tankin was kind enough to share with him and Porsche, nor the cow soy that Pete usually really likes to get from the buffet in the main family compound. When he returns home, the spicy beef dish Vegas has made for him made Pete falter. His hands shook, raising the tender-looking bite of beef coated in an aromatic sauce and flecked with the shredded remains of some sort of green leafy vegetable and strips of chili. It shook enough that Vegas noted almost immediately. He had been trying to hide the speck of fear that was growing in his heart. Vegas put so much effort into making him food that he wanted to push through this stupid, illogical feeling so that he wouldn't waste his boyfriend's effort. Vegas had made this for him out of love. But he had noticed, and without even the slightest hesitation, Vegas returns to the protocol he had developed at the start of all of this. He cleans everything in the room, every surface including his hands, and throughout the food. He then changed his apron and cleaned everything again so that there would be no possible cross-contamination. Pete closed his eyes, grateful for the care but also mourning for food he knew would have been delicious. Vegas never made anything that tasted bad. There was the sound of a kitchen cupboard opening and closing and the muffled steps of his boyfriend approaching him. Pete's eyes pop open when he feels the weight of something being lowered into his hand. He looked down and saw the cardboard box Vegas had put there. It has to be, if not the most processed food in existence, then surely a runner-up. Encased in 3 distinctly separate sealed types of packaging, pristine shrink wrap around a closed cardboard outer box, and then the biscuits themselves were in yet another layer of plastic. The environment was crying, but this was the one food that Pete had been able to eat even when this paranoia had been at its worst. Just before Vegas had held him prisoner, Pete had been unwillingly starving himself. Being held there in that dark room had saved him in more ways than one. The biscuits had been the beginning. It's still scary to eat this. It is possible that someone poisoned the mixture at the factory where the biscuits were made. Possible but unlikely unless they were planning a mass poisoning. It was more likely that the outermost layer of plastic had come into contact with something dangerous and that Pete had then contaminated the biscuits with his now dirty fingers. Vegas donned a pair of sterile gloves that he had just removed from their packet aseptically. A professional move that almost makes Pete laugh, but his chest is tight with the fear of his food already being contaminated. But this is Vegas. He was smiling and still reaching it to take the inner plastic bag from the box. He wouldn't be doing that if he genuinely thought that it had been defiled. This is his Vegas. Those long blue nitrile-covered fingers delicately plucked out a chocolate biscuit and held it out for Pete. Vegas would never hurt him, in a non-consensual way. Vegas made him good food, even when he had held him as a hostage, when he had had every chance to adulterate it, but he hadn't. He wouldn't do that now of all times. Food from P. Vegas was safe. It was always safe. It would always be safe. Pete hadn't forgotten that. He just needed to remind himself again, is all. And that's okay. Vegas is soothing cold when Pete burns too hotly, and life-saving warmth when his heart threatens to freeze over. The pain never really goes away, but the scars are starting to heal now Vegas has brought him safety. Pete's safe. The food is safe. He can eat it. He's safe. He's safe. He's safe. Pete opened his mouth and took a bite. The end. Thank you for listening.